Okay, I'm going to assemble a driver real fast. Whoop. Yeah, I gotta fix that seam line. It's a horrible seam line. MC10. That's the small one. That goes in the back of his head. That's Phillips. Yeah. Ouch. Yeah, see, I'm gonna have to fill in that seam line. Get rid of that blurb. Painting his face is going to be interesting. Okay, there's that. And A16 goes on there. MC9 is going to go all the way up and through. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, that's why. It wasn't all the way through. There we go. I don't know. I may end up taking them back apart so I can paint them, but I was just going to put this together so I could see. And that one's supposed to go. It's kind of crappy to have this thing just sitting there right in the center of his chest. And there's no spacer underneath there, which is kind of silly too. There's a gap. Okay, so anyway. And I'm going to use some ABS cement or Plastaweld. Plastric pretty much welds all different kinds of plastics together. That's the basics of the driver. And then just so you can see what it looks like, he's supposed to go right there, like that. And then you put a reinforcing piece here, and then you put a windshield piece here. Pull that pin out, lift it up. Yeah, that'll all lift up. You may have to remove that part. I'm not sure. I'll have to see how it does. Okay. Anyway, there's that. So in regards to the driver figure, that's being done there on 24, right? Because you got to do all that. And what they don't show you here is there's a gap that's left between the driver, this driver base, and the base of here, right? When you put it all on, it ended up floating out in space, basically. And it just didn't feel firm enough. So I realized, I remembered that I had this leftover foam that we used to put into the chassis for the battery. So I was sitting there thinking, well, why don't you just reuse the foam? So we had those foam pieces that were left over. So the thought was, let's reinforce it by putting it and filling in this gap around there because it's adhesive taped. So I started doing it and realized I should film it. So here we go. So this is kind of my answer to that, which is let's just fill in the gap with the foam that was left, the foam offcuts that were left over. So, because I don't like the way that was just flopping around out there. There was no support to it, which means eventually at some point it's going to break. So why not fill in the gap? Okay, so now I can put him back together. And it's a Phillips head, which is funny that they did that. So let's get that up. Up into the hole. That's going to be that. And then his head. Except you got to put the body on. Okay. Keep that under pressure, under tension. And then start screwing it in. There we go. That is much more secure. Okay, so now I can screw that back in to that position, and to make it easy, just move the head. There's a little bit of foam in there, so just gotta watch out for that part. There we go. Which I don't know, this is going to end up being the final figure for this anyway, but for right now, it'll work. So now that has some support, because it's called a cantilever, right? Where you have a part that comes out, an overhang that comes off of an edge. If you don't have a certain amount of support, you can only cantilever so much before this will either break here or it'll create so much tension it'll snap, okay? So anyway, I'm not sure if you can see it, but you should be able to. There was that gap that was right here that was not filled in. So I just filled it in with the foam that was left over from the piece we used for the battery compartment there, right? Now also, I wasn't digging the way they had the receiver set up to where they put the receiver in here, right? You're putting that receiver in that spot, but they want you to bring the wires out the side, but they gave you this tiny little hole. So I went ahead and extended the hole all the way up on each side so I have a lot more room. And I don't care if it's pretty or not because it's not going to be really seen. And then it broke all the edges because fresh cut plastic is going to have sharp edges on it. So you want to use a file and break those edges down, because when the cables are moving around and all that, if it's a sharp edge, it can cut through the casing on your wiring, and then it can cause a short at some point. So that way you don't have to worry about it. So these are all broken, and I have a lot more room to run the servo wire. So now you have a lot more room for that to come out, so it's not so pinched. And then on the front, because of the way my receiver is, I needed a slot for the antenna. So now I have space so that when that all fits in, the antennas are not bound. So now the antennas, and I realized that that piece right there, you're supposed to put a foam piece underneath that it protects against the battery, or holds against the battery, not on top. I was like, that didn't make any sense, but I put it on there. Realized that it was shaded and dash outline, which means it's under, so it was underside. So I already put another one on there. But anyway, by doing that, this now has room for the antennas to come out, and they're not going to be bound. And then on the sides, you can see they have a lot more room for those cables to come out from the receiver. So that makes it a lot easier. And I'm not sure that's going to be the final destination point for it. I might end up modifying this even more. What I'm debating about doing is completely cutting out this entire section right here. And in essence, take this piece, leave this ledge here, but take this piece right here, cut it, and then move it back to here. Okay? Move it all the way back to here. Make a shelf, or use my other styrene plastic sheets that I have, and make a shelf that comes across here, and then possibly looking at taking the receiver and having this would be gone, right? So then take this and stick it to the back of it. So it would be stuck to that piece and it'd be open, so then these could come straight out, so you can just plug them in. So it'd be down like this, but it would be plugged in, and they would be going straight out to where they wouldn't have any bend or kinks on them or anything. So that's kind of the thought. But for now, I'm thinking this might just end up working like this, because they had it designed that way. There should be enough room in there to where when that's sitting like that, it's kind of hard to do, but you get the point. And it's sitting like that, you see how much room you have now for the cables to go up there, and then the cable come out the side. So, and I'm going to be running an LED kit through here so as well. Now something else I could think of, because this shell is a really good shell, but when you start thinking outside the box, I could always make a cut, because that post is all the way back here where that hole is. I could always cut and make like a big old slot right here that I can just take and run the servo cable straight in through the front, plug it in and down, and that way it's coming out the front and it's not all crazy. And then the same thing with the back. I could just leave this column here on each side, and then that way when it's in there like this, I won't even have to go out the sides. I can just, in essence, cut a big old square right here, and then that way they can, and I think this was supposed to help protect the receiver, but this is a waterproof receiver, so I don't have to worry about it so much. And I'm not going to be trying to like going through lakes and all that kind of crap with it or anything. It might get wet, but it's not going to get soaked. So I may just do that too. That way I don't even have to worry about running out the sides, but the sides is a natural way to bend it, so I'll see how it goes. And in the worst case, I'll just take and cut a panel out in the back here. And that way they could just go straight in. You know, I could just run it straight into the back. See, if it's like that, then you just plug it in, and it's really easy to plug in. And I don't have a lot of room back there, so I can always just take it and I can move it forward to where it's like sitting in there like that, and then that way I can just plug them in. Move that back. Can't, that right there, that doesn't leave enough room underneath here, because you have to go up underneath this piece here. So if I take and move that. Anyway, that was to show you that I just reinforced the driver, cut out 2 bigger slots there, which maybe I now wished I hadn't. I should have just cut a big square out back here, which I may still do. Anyway, just want to let you know. You'll figure out what I'm doing when I get done. Anyway, and right now I've currently got the wheels dechroming. I don't like the chrome. I want to paint them white or a different color, but I'm thinking white. Anyway, just wanted to give you that update on the driver part.